If anyone had told me that the course of my family's life would shift so dramatically over a long weekend in Vermont, I might have laughed it off. But even as I boarded the flight from LaGuardia to Burlington with my husband, Michael, there was a tiny, inexplicable knot in my stomach. At the time, I chalked it up to the excitement of my younger brother's wedding. Ethan was finally marrying Emily, the woman he'd spoken about for months in glowing, almost breathless terms. Michael was beside himself with excitement. Tui rarely took time away from the hospital, but for Ethan's wedding, he managed to carve out 4 full days, something I could never take for granted. He'd even joked about getting to see me dressed up and dancing for once, rather than just falling asleep on the couch with my laptop open to another case file. We landed in Vermont in the kind of golden late afternoon light that you wish you could bottle. The air outside the airport was crisp, and just beginning to carry the promise of fall. Our rented SUV wound along a 2-lane road past wide fields and maple groves, then finally up a long drive shaded by birch trees. And then there it was, Hawthorne Estate, sitting high above a glimmering lake, its sprawling white facade wrapped in ivy, every window blazing with sunlight. I felt a little flutter of awe just stepping out of the car, suitcase in hand, as if I were walking into a storybook. Ethan came running down the steps before I even had time to open the trunk. He looked both exhausted and elated, his hair messier than usual, his cheeks red from the cool air and nerves. He hugged me tight, lifting me off my feet, then patted Michael on the back with a laugh. "Anna, you're finally here. You have to meet Emily. She's inside, with the caterers, directing things. Of course. She's incredible, you'll see." His enthusiasm was contagious. I could see in his eyes that he was desperate for my approval. I remembered all those phone calls and late-night texts over the past year. Stories about Emily's wit, her European family, her high-powered job in Boston, and her way of making every room brighter. I was happy for him. Truly, I was, but I could also see the exhaustion in his posture, the way his smile faltered just for a second when he thought I wasn't looking. Inside, the estate was abuzz with preparations. The scent of fresh flowers, roses, peonies, lilac filled the halls. Emily's voice echoed from the grand dining room, warm and commanding, as she sorted out a minor crisis with the wine delivery. When she finally appeared, I saw at once why Ethan was so enchanted. Emily was tall and striking, her dark hair swept into a simple chignon, her emerald green dress setting off her pale skin and bright eyes. There was an air of easy confidence about her, and the hint of a British accent that somehow made everything she said sound more important. She greeted me with a firm handshake, then pulled me into a quick, European-style kiss on both cheeks. "Anna, I've heard so much about you. Ethan talks about you all the time." She said it so genuinely that I immediately felt a strange mixture of flattery and defensiveness. Michael introduced himself, and she sized him up in a single glance, her smile never faltering. The introductions continued in a blur. My parents arrived a little later, and I watched with some amusement as Emily turned her considerable charm on them. My mother, always friendly, was instantly drawn in by Emily's stories of her eccentric family in Europe, their little chateau in France, and her boarding school days in London. My father, who usually took his time warming up to new people, was almost uncharacteristically animated. He told Emily about his upbringing in Connecticut and his business ventures, everything from a small software company he'd built in the 90s to his recent real estate investments in Manhattan. Emily listened with rapt attention, laughing in all the right places, asking questions that made him puff up with pride. I couldn't help but admire the way Emily moved through the room, always at the center of things, always in control without ever seeming pushy. She seemed to know exactly what everyone needed, whether it was an extra napkin, a compliment on their tie, or a clever joke to ease an awkward pause. The caterers, the florists, even the hired band, all of them looked to Emily for direction. I could tell she liked being in charge, but in such a gracious way that no one seemed to mind. As the sun set, the estate transformed into a scene straight out of a magazine. Strings of lights twinkled over the terrace, and the lake below caught the last pink glow of the evening sky. Guests trickled in for the welcome dinner, each one greeted warmly by Emily and Ethan, who seemed to glow in each other's company. The sound of laughter, clinking glasses, and music filled the house. I found myself relaxing, chatting with cousins and old friends, basking in the warmth of family. Still, even amid all the joy and celebration, I couldn't shake a faint sense of unease. Maybe it was the way Emily would occasionally glance at her phone. She seemed to have a different one each time I caught her. Or perhaps it was how every story she told was just a bit too perfect. Every detail so well. At one point, I noticed Michael watching her as well, a subtle crease between his brows that I knew meant he was thinking hard. Later that night, after the guests had drifted off to their rooms and the kitchen had gone quiet, I lay in the big four-poster bed in our guest suite and tried to put my finger on what was bothering me. Michael was already half asleep beside me, exhausted from the day's travel and festivities. I listened to the sounds of the old house settling, the creak of floorboards, the distant hum of laughter echoing from the hall. Maybe I was overthinking it, I told myself. Maybe this was just what happiness looked like after so many hard years for our family. Still, as I closed my eyes, I couldn't shake the feeling that something small and vital was out of place, just beneath the surface of all this beauty and joy. If I had known then what I know now, I would have stayed awake a little longer, searching for the cracks in the perfect facade. But at the time, I just let myself drift off, hoping the next day would bring nothing but celebration. The morning sun poured into our bedroom in the east wing of Hawthorne Estate, flooding the whitewashed walls with a soft, golden glow. I woke before Michael and stood for a while by the window, watching deer graze near the tree line. Vermont looked impossibly peaceful from up here, the lake glinting beyond a veil of mist, and for a moment, I felt as if I were in a world untouched by anything but joy. Michael eventually stirred, reaching for my hand with a sleepy smile, and the simple, familiar warmth of his touch helped soothe my nerves. It was Ethan's wedding weekend, I reminded myself, and nothing should ruin it, not even the strange twinges of doubt I'd felt the night before. Downstairs, the estate was already buzzing with activity. The kitchen bustled with staff prepping an extravagant breakfast. Fresh pastries, Vermont maple syrup in crystal pitchers. My parents sat at a long table on the patio, talking with Ethan and Emily as if they'd known each other all their lives. Emily looked radiant, her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, her laugh ringing out like a bell. I joined them, trying to soak up the easy atmosphere. Ethan seemed lighter than he had in weeks, and my mother had taken to Emily with the kind of affection she usually reserved for my childhood friends. Emily launched into stories about her eccentric relatives in Scotland, describing a cousin who bred miniature horses and an aunt who insisted on serving tea at precisely for every day. She mimicked their Scottish brogues so convincingly that everyone burst out laughing. My father, usually a reserved listener, hung on her every word, asking about London, Paris, and the family estate in Sussex she mentioned almost often. I watched as she seamlessly wove her narrative, shifting accents with each story, never once stumbling over a detail. I found myself wanting to believe her who wouldn't want such a lively, fascinating woman to join our family. Still, I noticed the tiniest flicker of something calculating behind her eyes when she caught me watching. The rehearsal dinner was set for that evening, so the day was a flurry of activities. Flowers arrived in bouquets. The band rehearsed on the terrace, and family friends trickled in from all over New England. Michael and I took a walk around the grounds, arm in arm. He asked me, gently, if I was feeling better about everything. I told him I was trying, but the feeling of unease kept resurfacing. Like a splinter, I couldn't quite work free. He squeezed my hand and promised to keep an eye out, his doctor's instinct for trouble just as sharp outside the hospital as in it. That afternoon, Emily's parents arrived. They swept into Hawthorne Estate with an air of subtle grandeur, her mother draped in a tailored navy suit, her father impeccably dressed, silver hair shining. Their accents were polished and hard to place, almost a blend of English and something else, and their manners were flawless to flawless, I realized later. They greeted everyone by name, smiled at all the right moments, and seemed instantly at home among strangers. By dinner, the house was alive with celebration. Tables had been set on the terrace overlooking the lake, and strings of lights twinkled overhead. Glasses of Chardonnay flowed freely. Emily presided over it all, moving from guest to guest, her hand on Ethan's arm, her laughter rising above the hum of conversation. Toasts began. Ma. Father spoke movingly about Ethan's childhood. Emily's parents offered a witty, elegant speech about blending families across the Atlantic, and even I was drawn up to say a few words. Through it all, Emily glowed with the confidence of someone who'd always belonged. But as the evening wore on, the little oddities I'd noticed the day before began to stand out. I watched as Emily slipped a phone into her bag, then later, when she thought no one was looking, pulled out a different one, smaller, with a gold case. Later still, during a quiet moment on the porch, I saw her tapping away at yet another phone, this one sleek and black. It was a subtle thing, but the habit was there, always checking, always switching. It made me uneasy. I mentioned it to her in passing, trying to keep my tone light. You're quite the multitasker with all those phones. Emily, what are you up to? Secret agent work on the side? She laughed easily, brushing it off as work stuff, and keeping up with friends in Europe. I tried again later, half joking. Your parents have the most interesting accents. Where exactly did you all grow up? She grinned, shrugging. It's just a family joke. We like to pretend we're posher than we are. My mother says I sound American when I'm tired. She flashed me a conspiratorial wink. Everyone else laughed, but the explanation left me cold. It felt rehearsed. Michael, always quietly observant, picked up on the tension. The next morning, at breakfast, he leaned across the table and spoke so quietly only I could hear. Did you catch what Emily said last night about her job in Boston? She told me she works for a tech firm, but your dad said she mentioned she was in the law last night. That's not the only detail that's shifted. I think there's something odd here. Anna, his eyes flicked toward Ethan and Emily, now laughing together by the edge of the garden, silhouetted against the rising sun. Have you noticed the phones? I nodded. 3, at least. And did you notice how her parents kept dodging questions about their time in Europe? I asked her mother about Paris, and she just smiled and changed the subject. Michael's expression grew serious. I've seen this before. Little inconsistencies, changing stories, people who are too charming for their good. Sometimes it means nothing. But sometimes, he trailed off, not wanting to say more in front of the family. I tried to dismiss it as pre-wedding jitters, the stress of hosting so many people, but I knew Michael's instincts were rarely wrong. Later, while everyone was out by the lake, Michael quietly made a call to his friend Jenna, who worked in cybersecurity in Chicago. I overheard just enough to know he was checking for anything unusual: log transactions, digital footprints, social media profiles that didn't quite add up. He was careful not to worry me, but I saw how focused he became, scrolling through emails on his phone with a frown. I don't want to alarm you, he said when I pressed him, but I want to be sure everything is above board. Just a feeling. I tried to shake off my doubts as we dressed for the rehearsal dinner. Emily knocked on our door, radiant in blue silk, bringing a small gift for Michael and me, a delicate porcelain box she said was from the family collection in Sussex. Her eyes met mine, unwavering. For a moment, I wondered if I was being unfair, if I was letting my imagination get the best of me. But as the evening wore on, and as Emily moved through the room with that same flawless grace, I couldn't help but feel that something essential was being hidden, just beneath her perfect smile. As I drifted off to sleep that night, listening to Michael's soft breathing beside me, I tried to convince myself that everything would be fine. Still, the doubt lingered, as persistent as the moonlight spilling through our window, refusing to let me rest. The air in our room that evening felt thick and heavy, as if the walls themselves knew that something was about to break. Michael had been gone most of the afternoon, claiming he needed to make a few work calls, but I knew better. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring out at the darkened lake and the lights flickering in the main hall below, feeling the weight of 1,000 unspoken fears. When the door finally opened, he stepped in quietly, carrying a thin manila folder and a look on his face I'd only seen in the worst moments at the hospital. He didn't speak at first. He simply handed me the folder. I opened it, my hands shaking, and tried to make sense of the documents inside. There were printouts of old marriage licenses, bank records, and even grainy photographs of Emily, my brother, standing next to 2 different men, each at a different wedding. Their faces were different, but hers was unmistakable. That same composed smile, those steady, intelligent eyes. Michael sat beside me and began to explain, his voice steady but full of regret. Her real name is not Emily Stafford, he said. She's been married twice before, both times to men from wealthy families. In both cases, she vanished less than a year later, just after large sums of money disappeared from their family accounts. Jenna and her team traced the transfers California, then Massachusetts. She uses aliases, new documents each time. She's an expert at changing her story, just enough to fit in wherever she goes. I tried to process what he was saying, but my mind was spinning. How much money? I managed to whisper. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, he replied. The family's never recovered it. She left behind no trace, at least, not until Jenna started piecing it together. I pressed my fingers to my temple, feeling suddenly cold. All the little things, the shifting accents, the multiple phones, the stories that changed depending on who was listening, they all fit together now like puzzle pieces snapping into place. My heart ached for Ethan, who had only ever wanted to believe in love, and for my father, Who trusted so easily when someone showed genuine interest in his life and work? But there was something else, too. Michael showed me the last page, an email from Jenna. She planted a keylogger on your father's laptop, he said. It's been tracking everything: passwords, logins, bank account details. Jenna picked up suspicious traffic from his IP address and confirmed it with a quick scan. If we hadn't caught it, she would have had full access to his business accounts by tomorrow. The shock hit me like a wave. My father's entire livelihood, our family's stability, everything he had worked for, it was all at risk. I felt anger burning in my chest, not just for myself, but for my brother, for my parents, for the home I'd always believed was safe from this kind of darkness. Michael put his hand gently over mine. We have to talk to them, Anna. Tonight, before anything else happens. I nodded, unable to find my voice, and followed him down the long, dim hallway to the library, where the heavy scent of old leather and wood always made me feel small and comforted. Now, it just felt suffocating. My father was there already, going over some paperwork for the reception, and Ethan was curled up in one of the big armchairs, reading through his vows for the next day. I could see the hope and excitement in his face, and I hated what we were about to do. Michael closed the doors and took a breath. Ethan, Mr. Harper, can you both sit down? We need to talk, and it's urgent. My father's brow furrowed. Is everything all right? I spoke first, my voice shaking. We need you to see something. I handed the folder to Ethan, watching his hands tremble as he turned the pages. The color drained from his face as he flipped through the photos and documents, his jaw tightening in disbelief. My father scanned the documents, looking for a flaw, a mistake, some reason to dismiss what we were saying. Michael spoke quietly, explaining what Jenna and her team had found: the keylogger, the fake identities, the pattern of manipulation and theft. It was as if a dam had burst. The truth poured out, unstoppable and devastating. For a moment, no one spoke. My father stared at his hands, eyes wide, as if he were watching his entire world tilt sideways. Ethan sat frozen, lips parted, a look of confusion and heartbreak crossing his face. This can't be true, he whispered. Emily loves me. She couldn't. I'm so sorry, Ethan, I said, kneeling by his side. We wanted to believe in her, too. But the evidence is real. Michael's friend in cybersecurity, Jenna, confirmed everything. And the keylogger she was trying to steal from Dad. She was going to rob us. Ethan's hands shook as he buried his face in them, breathing raggedly. My father finally looked up, his voice breaking. We need to confront her. We can't let her leave with everything. We called Emily in together. She entered the library, her posture perfect, her eyes calm. For a moment, it seemed as if she might try to talk her way out. But as Michael presented the printouts and Jenna's digital evidence, something in her face shifted. The warmth and softness vanished. Her British accent faded, replaced by something colder, flatter. She regarded us all with a steady, emotionless gaze. You're clever, she said, folding her arms across her chest. But not quite clever enough. You have no idea what you're up against. It was chilling, hearing her speak without pretense for the first time. Ethan looked shattered, tears streaming down his face. My father sat back, stunned, as if every ounce of energy had been drained from him. Michael stepped closer, quietly informing Emily that the authorities had already been called. She seemed unfazed, almost bored, as the front doorbell rang and the estate's security let the police in. Within minutes, Emily and her so-called parents were handcuffed and led away, their expressions cold and unrepentant. As the door closed behind them, the reality of what had just happened settled over us all. Ethan collapsed into the armchair, sobbing quietly. My father put his arm around him, holding him tightly, as if trying to protect him from a pain that had already taken root. I knelt beside them, fighting my tears, knowing we had just lost more than a bride. We had lost a piece of our trust in the world. That night, as I lay awake listening to the silence of the estate, I felt both relief and sorrow. The danger was gone, but the scars would linger. Our family had been tested in a way I never imagined. I promised myself that we would help Ethan through the heartbreak, that we would heal together, and that we would never again be so easily deceived by a perfect smile and a well-told story. The days following Emily's arrest unfolded in a haze, as if we were all moving underwater, voices muffled and gestures slow. The grand halls of Hawthorne Estate felt emptier than ever, the lingering scent of flowers and polished wood a stark contrast to the shock that pulsed through our family. The wedding was, of course, called off. Guests who hadn't already arrived were quietly told to stay home, and those who were there packed up early, offering awkward, sympathetic hugs before driving away down the long gravel driveway. Ethan disappeared into the guest house with barely a word. The joy that had lit up his face just days before now buried beneath a heavy, impenetrable silence. For me, the days bled together. The estate became a place of routine, a constant stream of law enforcement officers moving through the halls, private meetings with investigators, tense phone calls with lawyers and bankers. I watched my father, who had always seemed so invincible, suddenly look smaller, his shoulders bowed beneath a weight he could not shrug off. At times, I would catch him standing at the window, gazing out over the lake, his reflection mingling with the morning mist. There was a sadness in his eyes I had never seen before. It was the look of a man who'd come dangerously close to losing everything he'd worked for. And, more importantly, the trust of the people he loved. Michael, ever the steady hand in a storm, took charge of the practicalities. He coordinated with Jenna and her team, following up with the cybersecurity firm and the bank's fraud division. It was because of their diligence that nearly all the missing $200,000 siphoned in carefully planned transfers were recovered or traced. I saw the relief on my father's face the day the bank called to confirm, but it did little to erase the deeper wounds left by betrayal. The police, too, were relentless, questioning each of us in turn, collecting evidence, following digital trails that led to Emily's network of accomplices. By the end of the week, we learned she and her fake family had been charged with conspiracy and fraud, and a court date was set for the following month. My mother, who had always believed the best in people, moved through those days in a state of disbelief. She kept asking how we could have missed the signs, how someone so warm and poised could be so calculating underneath. I tried to comfort her, but truthfully, I was wrestling with the same questions myself. I replayed every conversation with Emily, every shared joke and confidante's whisper, searching for the moment when the illusion slipped, for the clue I should have caught. Michael told me not to be too hard on myself. You saw more than anyone, he reminded me. Still, the guilt clung to me, sharp and persistent. The estate, so recently brimming with celebration, became a place of quiet reflection. In the evenings, after the last investigator had left and the lights were dimmed, we would gather in the great room. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting long shadows on the walls. My father, Michael, and I would share coffee and old stories, sometimes lapsing into silence as we watched the flames. There was a comfort in the ordinary rituals. My father pouring a glass of bourbon, my mother crocheting in her favorite chair, Michael flipping through the newspaper. Even Ethan, silent and withdrawn, would sometimes appear, sitting quietly at the edge of the room, listening to our voices as if drawing strength just from being near. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, things began to shift. The calls from the police became less frequent. The estate staff, so anxious in the first days, started to smile again as they moved through the halls. One morning, I heard Ethan's laughter drifting down from the guest house porch, and my heart leapt. He was talking with Michael, the two of them hunched over mugs of coffee, heads together in the kind of deep, honest conversation that had always marked their friendship. Later that evening, Ethan joined us by the fire. He was pale and a little thinner, his eyes red-rimmed, but there was a steadiness in his voice that hadn't been there before. I keep thinking about how easily I was fooled, he admitted, staring into the flames. How much I wanted to believe, not just in Emily, but in this idea that everything was finally coming together. He looked up at me, his gaze full of gratitude and sorrow. Thank you for not giving up on me, or on the truth. We rallied around him. My father, whose voice had wavered 4 days, reached over and put his hand on Ethan's shoulder. If you and Michael hadn't been here, he began, but his voice cracked and he couldn't finish. I reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. We all had a lot to process, but for the first time, it felt possible that we might come through it together. In the days that followed, we talked a lot about trust, about how to move forward, about the meaning of family when the world feels unsafe. We took long walks along the lake, letting the crisp Vermont air clear our minds. Michael organized a day trip to Burlington, just to get us out of the house. We wandered through art galleries, drank 2 sweet coffee, and shared a lunch of maple-glazed salmon on the waterfront. Even Ethan smiled, if only for a little while. At night, as I lay beside Michael in our guest room, I found myself thinking less about Emily's betrayal and more about the resilience of my family. We had been hurt, yes, but we were not broken. We had come face to face with deceit and danger, and we had survived, together. My parents were still themselves, vulnerable but strong. Ethan would heal. I knew he would. He had us, and we had him. Looking back, I can see that week at Hawthorne Estate changed us in ways I never expected. It stripped away some of our innocence. Yes, but it also brought us closer, forced us to look out for each other in ways we hadn't before. We learned, painfully, that the greatest dangers often come disguised as friends, as lovers, as people who promise us the world. But we also learned that love, real love, the kind that endures hardship, can pull you through the darkest days. Even now, months later, I am grateful for the lessons we learned. Trust, but verify. Ask questions, even when the answers might hurt. And above all, never underestimate the strength of a family that chooses to face the truth, no matter how hard it might be. Our wounds may take time to heal, but the bonds we forged in those days are stronger than ever. We are, in the end, not just survivors, but a family tested and true.